Hi, thanks for watching. Okay, in this video, I want to keep focusing on how basically NPD and cluster B is essentially a breakdown in dialectical processing. Okay, and I think this is so important, and it probably deserves just a lot of focus. Okay, because I think we're going to get a lot out of this. And basically, to look at cluster B and NPD is a breakdown in dialectical processing. Okay, as a result of an underlying arousal dysregulation. Okay, and basically, my hope, and I really think has a lot of possibility, is that if we can just sort of even out and stabilize our arousal patterns, okay, that with a healthy arousal pattern, avoiding the big spikes and drops and erratic arousal changes, I think if we can just get the arousal pattern just somewhat stabilized and improve our baseline, I think the dialectical processing will just come organically. Okay. I think that's very important. I think it's so important not to get into the trap of trying to mimic and force healthy behavior, like following a healthy, because then we'll just start simulating. I think it's very problematic for a person with cluster B to simulate healthy personality. I think that feeds right into the narcissism, and it also can very easily just get us into where we're sort of living into a false self kind of sort of acting in life. And I think that causes a lot of dissonance, a lot of dysphoria, and it builds up a lot of tension, and just a lot of I think it's almost like it almost feeds the addictive cycle, and it's probably not very good for our arousal patterns. So I guess my theory is that if we try to fake being normal, we're just going to build up a lot of these arousal tensions, and our arousal patterns will really just it's almost like an addictive process. So basically, for me, it's kind of like the other way around. If we can just work on getting the arousal patterns more stabilized, then I think all the humanity will just come back to us organically, and especially the dialectical process. Okay, so I just want to go back once again to talk about exactly what I mean by dialectical process. Okay, in philosophy, dialectic basically is confronting and reckoning with conflicting possibilities. Okay, conflicting ideas. You see it in our personal lives. You see it in professional and also in political. Um, Basically, in every personal experience, I'm going to be dealing with contrasting two sides of the coin. Let's say, like, say, just in the drama of life. Like, my wife wants to move to a house where I have to pay higher rent because she'll be closer to downtown, or she'll be closer to where her parents live. And then I'm thinking, well, if we could have a cheaper apartment or a cheaper house, we're going to save money so we can buy a house. If we have to pay more rent, we're just going to we're just going to save less. And so basically, these are two ideas, and in some sense, they're sort of contradicting each other. Okay. And in life, you'll see that we have all kinds of contradictions. It would be so nice to eat this cheeseburger. On the one hand, it would be so tasty and I really deserve it and I need something that feels good. On the other hand, I'm going to feel like crap afterwards. It's sort of like, it'll be better for me just to eat, just to make lentils and make some vegetables at home. Oh, how boring. I mean, two possibilities. All the time in life, we're dealing with conflicting possibilities and we're always reconciling things. I mean, the thing is that with cluster B, at some point, for very certain key areas, that reconciliation process, that dialectical process, is sort of degraded and sort of broken down. Now, I don't propose trying to directly fix the dialectical process. I think that's an organic process. I think if you just put dissonant things on the table, you'll automatically reconcile them or you'll dispose of them. Okay, but that's all takes care of itself organically. I think where we have to do the work is in our arousal patterns. When our arousal is erratic, we will just kind of break down and abandon and degrade the dialectical processing because we won't be able to handle and hold dissonant concepts, dissonant possibilities. We just won't do it. And you see this a lot with people that are addicted to drugs. When I've been addicted, because I've had addictive issues, and when I've seen other people in their addiction, their arousal is so erratic and so irritable that they don't have the containing, they don't have the the containment. They can't really contain. They don't have either the patience or just the resources to sort of contain dissonant ideas and sort of process them. That takes a lot of patience. That takes a lot of tolerance. And when you're in that erratic arousal, you're so preoccupied with just the ups and downs that you really don't have I guess the bandwidth or like the RAM or short-term memory or the processing resources to be able to really handle sort of reconciling dissonant concepts or dissonant proposals or whatever. So basically, I want to talk specifically about how this idea of dialectical processing applies to self-esteem. Okay, because dialectical processing takes place in all aspects of life: decision making, how we form attitudes. If you don't have dialectical processing, you'll only see people as all good or all bad. You'll sort of have a cartoonish. So basically, when we lose the dialectical processing, that is splitting. That is what splitting is. That we've lost our dialectical processing. Okay. And again, once again, I don't think we should try to directly have dialectical processing. I think we should trust that organically it will be there if we just have and allow dissonant things to be in the space and not dispose of them. Okay. So basically, I want to talk about how self-esteem. I believe self-esteem is actually an artificial construct. Okay. I don't really think a healthy person will have any self-esteem, whether positive or negative. Okay. I really believe that. I think they'll tell you that they have good self-esteem. Like, say, if you run into a really healthy person and you say, well, what is your self-esteem? More than likely, if they're really healthy, they'll probably pause for a second and say, gee, let me think about that, because I don't really think healthy people really have much of a disposition on what they think of themselves. Okay, they're just sort of in that neutral dialectical space where the dissonances are just there on the table and there's no disposal of the issue. Okay, so I really do believe that self-esteem is one of the key examples and the key signs of a person who is degraded in their dialectical processing. Okay, so, and it's a sign whether positive or negative. Okay, when someone has self-esteem, that's a sign that their arousal patterns are probably erratic enough that they just don't have the resources or the wherewithal to really have an active, full dialectical process with regard to their own experience. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Okay, the best analogy I have, and I do have a background in legal. Okay, I have a degree in law, and I work in law. That's part of what I do for a living. I work in law. I do legal analysis and legal research, and that's one of the things that I do. And so I do have a background in litigation. Okay, and I think litigation is an excellent metaphor like politics. Okay, politics and litigation is an excellent metaphor for the dialectical processing that may or may not be present to how would I say, like, we all have dialectical processing, but some people have more degraded, more compromised dialectical processing, or even discontinuous dialectical processing, where we're just not even really reconciling things. Okay, so I think this is very analogous to being in a litigation. Okay, because litigation is basically the presentation of two sides of the same problem. Okay, you have two sides of the same problem, or even sometimes you have more than two parties to a litigation. You might have 5 or 6 parties to a litigation. Okay, but basically you have several parties to the litigation who bring different points of view on the same issue. Okay, the same issue, different points of view. Okay, the same thing goes on in our personal lives. In every issue that we deal with, there are different points of view that are dissonant. Okay, just by the fact that you have 2 different points of view on an issue, just the fact that they're different, they are dissonant in the sense that they're not the same point of view. Okay, so inside of ourselves, we have different points of view on every issue that we live. Okay, just for a split second, if I think, I notice that my water heater doesn't have hot water. In an instant, I have dissonant points of view on the same issue. Do I take a cold shower or do I just not take a shower? It's like everything we do I make fried eggs or scrambled eggs? Do I make boiled eggs? Do I buy Kentucky Fried Chicken, or do I cut some vegetables? I mean, we are always presented on the same issue with different points of view, and every point of view that's different is dissonant. Um, just by the fact that points of view are different, they are dissonant. Okay, so basically in litigation, basically you bring points of view on the same issue to a forum, to a court, and litigation can last for years. Okay, it's basically just a series of motions, a series of procedures, because everybody's just fighting over these issues, different aspects of these issues, and working and working and working and working, sort of wrestling through these issues. Okay, until the court disposes of the issue. Okay, and the court disposes of the issue by issuing a motion to dismiss, or by ruling with a verdict or an adjudication on the merits. Okay, so basically, the court has several different options. You could do, like, say, just a motion to dismiss that the cause of action is invalid, and so it won't even be decided. Or maybe the court can do a summary judgment where it'll just take the evidence before trial, and it'll just make a judgment before trial just on the evidence. And then you can also just go to trial, and then the court hopefully will sort of weigh all the different competing points of view and sort of make a clumsy average of everything and make a final verdict. Sometimes it'll be a bench trial where the judge makes the verdict, or it could be the jury. The jury actually decides certain factual issues, and the judge accepts those verdicts and makes a final judgment. Once the judgment is made, or once the case is dismissed, that is disposing of the case. Okay, so this is analogous to how we deal with dissonant possibilities. Dissonant points of view on an issue. Okay, this is the dialectical process. All right, so basically, again, whenever we have a degradation of our sort of reconciling and reckoning with different, say, competing points of view, or dissonant things that are present in us, when that gets degraded, we are split. Okay, we are no longer in that harmony where we're sort of negotiating and reckoning things. And I really believe that constant, continuous reckoning, processing, that dialectical processing, that is part of the heart of our soul. That's part of an essential human heart. That's part of the essential human heart. And when it becomes sufficiently degraded, I think energetically, subliminally, without saying anything, just by feeling, I think people can sense something very uncomfortable in a person who has a sufficiently degraded dialectical process. Okay, and I think it's automatic. When our arousal is too erratic, we will degrade. It will degrade. Okay, and I think people will really feel it. Okay, and I think we can tell that other people are uncomfortable. And so then what do? We start to manufacture a simulation that we're more human than what we really are, and then we get into that kind of presenting ourselves fake. The false presentation. So it's really just kind of a vicious circle, because when we get into the false presentation, we're actually building up our arousal, which makes us even more degraded in our actual dialectical processing. So let's go back to the legal litigation analogy to our own internal dialectical processing. So basically, we could think of our continuous dialectical processing as the ability to have on the table, okay, competing dissonant possibilities, dissonances, active dissonances, and then what is it? Do we do like the court and just dismiss the case without ruling on it, and just dispose of it without ruling on it? Or do we let it litigate and let it litigate and let it litigate? That, I believe, I hope to help people, I hope to propose, and hopefully people will understand that holding in reckoning of these dissonant points of view, that holding of these the reckoning of all these dissonances, that is part of our heart. Okay, and I think I encourage people not to be too degraded in their heart, because I think that really, when we get really degraded in that part of our heart, I think people can really tell, and I think it really will make people feel uncomfortable, and it really does cause a lot of problems in our ability to relate not just in how we mechanically process things, but also how we make other people feel. Okay. I think we don't want to be very degraded in that part of us. I think, and also we don't want to underestimate that if we can develop a more continuous, a more continuous dialectical processing, I think people will feel more comfortable with us, and it'll give us more warmth, honest, organic, human heart, And I think that organically, by osmosis, without telegraphing it, I think people will just notice, And I think it'll make us better integrated into ourselves and into humanity. Okay. And we won't have to worry about how much empathy do I have, how arrogant am I. It's all organic, okay? And the thing is that we don't have to actually mechanically try to be in dialectic, okay? All we have to do is just allow dissonances to be on the table, present and not disposed, okay? But going back to the litigation analogy, how are all the ways that we dispose to get things off the table so we don't have to hold them in dissonance, okay? We can do it by just dismissing the case. Like, this is not a valid case, just dismiss it. Totally unresolved, that's the split. That's where we have splitting, where they're just unreconciled, okay? Basically, split just means unreconciled, okay? The other way we can do it is we can do it on summary judgment, where we don't want to go through the whole trial. We just want to kind of basically look at the evidence, do a quick analysis, and then, okay, done. I made my decision. Sort of semi-reconciled, but disposed, okay? And then there is, okay, I'll have the trial, I have a quick trial, but I'm still going to dispose, okay? So I guess ideally, to avoid having too much clutter in our minds, at some point, I think we do have to dispose of issues, okay? But the idea is that I think we always want to give a full trial, a full due process, let's say. give a full due process to different things, so that we can build the continuity and build the kind of the endurance of our dialectical processing, okay? And maybe for some, it depends on the issue. For some issues, I think we should, give it, let's say, an hour of reflection or sleep on it, maybe give it sleep on it, and then always be willing to reopen the case, So maybe like as a benchmark, we could say between 4 and 12 hours, That's like a fair due process to really not really decide on something and just make it a practice to say, I'll give it between 4 and 12 hours. Now, the actual processing, I don't think we should try to like mechanically try to imitate or try to figure out what it means to have dialectic. I think we should trust that that's an organic process that we don't have to try to do. Just put the dissonances on the table, leave them on the table of our mind, okay? And don't dispose of them. And just have them together on the table for, like, say, 4 to 12 hours, and we will automatically, organically have the dialectic, okay? I think the actual dialectic is organic. We shouldn't try to mechanically force that. It's just leave dissonances on the table, and the dialectic will process them, okay? So we can make, like, say, like a program, like a personal program, like, whenever I have, like, kind of serious, semi-serious, dissonant things, on the table, like, how do I feel about this person? Or, how do I feel about making a decision about, maybe whether I'm going to do I really need to buy a brand new washing machine? Like, okay, that kind of level of decision, like, do I want to get a subscription that costs $45 a year or whatever, just like put it on the table for like 4 to 12 hours, you know what I mean? And you guys can probably think of more, like, I'm not very creative, so there's probably a lot of really cool examples that I'm not even thinking of. But, kind of that level of a trivial sort of thing, kind of decisions to make, like, should I get cable TV or should I expand my cable program, or do I want to change my cellular or telephone plan or whatever, just like however I feel about it, sort of leave the pros and cons, the dissonances on the table about 4 to 12 hours, and then dispose of it after having that time. So it's just kind of building up the dialectical processing. A more serious situation would be, like, say, in the area of like friendships. Like, how do I feel about this person? You might have a friend who really disappoints you, okay, and says something that's really offensive or really surprises you. Like, I'm not sure if I even think this is a good person, That's kind of serious, because it really has to do with, like, friendships are very important. We shouldn't underestimate that. And when we make a decision about whether we think a person is good or bad, that's very serious, okay? And that may be a bad person, I don't know, but we should have the habit. And even when we watch like true crime, like say in the news, like, oh, this guy killed, four students in Idaho, or, blah, blah, blah. You hear all this evidence, and you really want to kind of adjudicate that quickly, like, yeah, 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 yeah. And of course, he may be guilty as hell, and, probably is. I mean, but just as a habit, when we're assessing people, and in our personal lives, or even, high profile things like politicians and stuff like that, you know, it's just a good exercise. It's for our benefit, just for our personal development, that maybe we should put, like, say, 7 days, of not really fully deciding, like just as a benchmark, just as a arbitrary, just an arbitrary benchmark, like, so if I'm going to make a decision about how I really feel about somebody who's very kind of sort of close to me, like a friend or something, I'll put it on the table for 7 days, 7 days. And just like after 7 days, that's enough time, whether for good or for bad, I'll make my decision, but hey, at least I processed it. But then maybe there's even another level. So like say people that are very close to you, like say a spouse, okay, let's say a brother, our parents, maybe an uncle, someone who's very close, okay. And let's say something happens that's very disappointing, very troubling, um, I don't know, like imagine you have an uncle who got put in jail for something, or, something really scandalous, but close to you, super close in your family. Or let's say your parent does something that really disappoints you, And in that one, maybe put it for 21 days, like just 21 days. Like, yeah, I'll make a decision, but I'll put it on the table. I'll leave it on the table for 21 days, And of course, I'm saying these things arbitrarily. It may be, for everybody, it may be different. Maybe it'll be like 18 days or maybe 7 days, who knows? But I'm just saying, we should just propose just arbitrary things to sort of increase our due process. They talk about due process of law, due process in politics, constitutional law. But, we have a constitution, and we should have a constitution, each one of us. And we deserve to propose a constitution. You're allowed to. Nobody's going to stop you from proposing a constitution. I will have due process, and I will have certain benchmarks of due process for different levels of dissonance, Let's say I don't like jazz, I don't like country music, Maybe you don't like country music, but let yourself, as an exercise, listen to, like, say, 25 minutes of country music, and then reassess, just because it's good practice for your own dialectical process, We all have due process in us, but if we don't exercise it, it's going to be degraded, okay? And I personally believe that one of the ways that we can sort of stabilize our arousal patterns is to engage in, not directly try to force the due process, but to allow the dissonances and sort of tolerate that discomfort without disposing, okay? So that they just kind of, we build our ability to hold and tolerate uncomfortable, sort of not unpleasant, it's more pleasant just to dispose of a dissonance. Dissonances are uncomfortable because they're sort of like unresolved things. So where I want to go with this finally is the sort of the main point of this video, which is self-esteem, okay? Self-esteem is one of these things where it's probably, in a way, even more important than, like, say, or it's at the level of, like, say, how much due process do we want to give when we have a problem with someone who's very close to us, like, say, a wife, a parent, a sibling. I'd say our own self-esteem is as serious, or maybe even more serious. It's very, very personal, okay? So basically, I would propose that the due process for assessing our own selves, okay, is indefinite. We never want to dispose of that issue, okay? That's an ongoing trial that we never want to come to a final verdict, okay? Because the bottom of a one person is endless, okay? I do have a definite personality, like, say, in the eyes of the omnipotent being, whatever. I mean, I don't know, because as a mortal, I can't see all the nuances of myself. I can't possibly have all the insight, and I also can't possibly have all the understanding to know how much of me is capable of modifying. Okay, so in other words, until I'm dead, the actual status of who I am is indeterminate, because it's still evolving in time. So like it is actually false to sort of assess oneself as what I am or how I am, because it's always there. Even though our plasticity does decrease with age, and we only have a limited amount of plasticity. Whatever plasticity we have does prevent us from being defined rigidly as something. Okay, there is always some changing and some evolution in how we are, and we don't want to get in the trap of sort of deciding how we are and then confining ourselves into that self-fulfilling determination. Okay, and also the other thing too is that when we dispose of the dialectic of who we are, when we dispose of it and get rid of that dialectic, we split on ourselves and we lose our heart, starting in how we are dealing with our own self. Okay, so it's interesting how, like, say the loss of heart starts, I think, sometimes with ourself. Okay, maybe not with everybody, but I think a lot of times it does. And so the idea of having self-esteem. Okay, self-esteem, the way I understand it, is a cognitive assessment of how good or how bad I am. Okay, it's a cognitive assessment, and I think that's false. I think it's very false. I think no honest human being can have a real cognitive assessment of how they are, how good or how bad they are. That it will always be false. Okay, and I think to be quite honest, I think we make those assessments because we want to dispose of uncomfortable dissonances about how we feel about ourselves. Okay, and from time to time, we will feel different ways about ourselves. Okay, we will have feelings about ourselves, and I think those feelings actually start with just baseline affect. Okay, so like say, if I have sort of an uneasy feeling, let's say, just kind of an attitude about life that's just kind of negative. Okay, that right there is a dissonance, because it's like, how would I say? It's sort of like a very uncomfortable situation that begs for me dealing with it. Okay, so like say, it's just natural as a human. If I'm feeling irritable and just uncomfortable and I don't feel good in the world, I don't have a positive feeling, and I'm just kind of not feeling well, as far as the world itself, I want to dispose of that somehow. It's just an instinct. We were not designed to tolerate a lot of discomfort. We have to develop the ability, as a part of our constitution. We have to propose a constitution and work at learning how to develop the ability to hold discomfort, to hold uncomfortable feelings. So if we just start with a bad feeling, okay, it's in our nature to want to dispose of it, okay, not to reconcile it, not to just let it be, is to dispose of it, okay. And one of the ways we dispose of negative feelings is by creating a story, by creating an assessment, like a court. The court will make an adjudication and a judgment, an assessment of the issue, and then dispose with that assessment. So just like a court, our dialectical abandonment, basically if we don't want to be holding too much in that dialectic, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and adjudicate the matter, and we'll make an assessment, basically tell a story about how we feel, and then we'll dispose of it like that. So basically, if I have like problems with my own affect, like I don't feel very good, it's very common for people who have depressive and dysthymic affect to create ideation that sort of reinforces and justifies the affect, because that way we can dispose of the issue. It's a way of getting it off the table and getting relief from that bad feeling. So a lot of times when people are depressive, they will start creating kind of very unfavorable stories about themselves, okay, to sort of wrap up the issue and get it off the table. Because worse it would be just to have it on the table, okay. So basically, when you have people who are depressed, they're very likely to start talking about how, yeah, I'll probably die when I'm 50. I don't know. I'm never gonna. Like they'll just start saying things like assessing themselves. Yeah, I'm just an addictive person. I'm never gonna stop smoking cigarettes. I'm not even afraid of getting lung cancer. And they're already kind of programming themselves, to a pretty negative thing. Or I don't know, like maybe a person has even like violent thoughts and negative thoughts, and it's like, yeah, I probably have the soul of a killer. I know how bad I am. Kind of making those sort of assessments. But basically, it's because it's more comfortable to summarize and wrap up the bad feeling and then sort of dispose of it than to just have it on the table just being uncomfortable and unresolved.